Hi there, I'm Kirby James from the GYST Method.
And I'm Nicole Gerard, also from the GYST Method.
And today what we'd like to bring to you are some thoughts about something that scares the heck out of a lot of CEOs.
Perfect.
And that is the daunting idea of doing something about the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you a short reflection, I was presenting on this to a CEO forum in Western Canada. And I presented our views on this. At one point, a gentleman, CEO of several successful companies, said, wow, that's really interesting. And he basically said, I don't believe any of it. Touching culture, it's the scariest thing ever. And I've been studying this as part of my part-time MBA, and I know. And he was a gentleman, quite frankly, who was, I think, overwhelmed by the idea. And I went through change school at the Rotman School, and it's like this fire hose that won't turn off about what it's about and how hard it is and how complex it is. But the reality is the world's moved on a little bit, and there are some really, really fantastic things out there.
Yeah, and I think your point about CEOs or leaders in general feeling, I know we don't want to overuse the term overwhelmed. Maybe it's intimidated by the idea of tackling something so ambiguous as culture. It makes them nervous because you never know if, unless you're acting in purpose and you know precisely where you need to move things, you don't know what that chain reaction is going to be, and you may end up making things worse, which often leads to inaction. You're doing nothing.
And that's exactly what I've heard from a number of clients I've worked with. This exact issue is this concern that things are good, not great.
Yeah,
they're not bad.
They're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And couldn't we make things like way, way worse? Aren't we about to run mad in the kitchen with spices and tools? And the reality of it, from my perspective, is no.
Yeah.
You hit on a key thing, though, for me. Going at the idea of touching your organization's culture actually has to start with clarity. Clarity of purpose, clarity of direction. You may not know the words, the terms, yet you've got a sense. And this isn't just a trend line on an annual comparison. How was our culture last year?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not as good. We have to do something because, my bosses expect me to.
Right.
No. What do you want it to be? And then joining in the never-ending journey there.
I just pause for a second, not to take you off track, but the point of never ending needs to be highlighted.
So if you go all the way back, for those of us that remember, Peter Senge and the Fifth Discipline and his chapter on personal mastery. Fast forward into a book written in the 90s by an Aikido master, a martial art, talking about, the book's called The Art of Mastery.
Yep.
And no matter where you look, and I know from my own studies in martial arts, it's this never-ending curve where you aspire to be perfect and go back at it every day knowing you'll never get there and you'll never give up.
And it's okay.
Yeah. It's absolutely okay because people will work for that person and for that organization because they see that they're dedicated to always wanting to get better, and not just wanting, actually doing something to get better, not just going, oh, our objective is excellence, and we worked at that company where excellence was one of the core values, but no one actually knew what it meant or could tell it was going on.
And it meant something different to everybody, which made it difficult to find individuals that aligned with that purpose.
So that actually brings me back to the three main messages I want to bring forward today. And the first one is really getting back to this idea of, so how do you know you need to address the issue of culture? Before we get on to the hows and the things.
Yeah.
For me, and we, John Rogers, who was at MDS where we worked, was an amazing leader. You would watch him in the cafeteria line, and he was spectacular, talking with the people who were serving the food.
Of course.
Anybody and everybody except his inner circle. because he was surrounded by them all the time.
That's the important piece of being a good leader.
Absolutely.
Know who you're working with.
And one of the things that I believe that he was doing in my conversations with him was he was checking for alignment.
Yeah.
Alignment on where we're going. Alignment on who we are. And that to me is the symptom. If you as a business leader are looking at your company and you're sitting in a meeting and you hear basically disagreements maybe escalating to arguments about who we are, how we do things, and where we're going, you have a culture issue.
Yes.
I'll just save all those extra words. You have a culture issue. It may not be a significant, serious one, or it may be. I don't know. What I do know is that when your organization isn't clear with itself, it won't be clear with your customers.
Of course.
And when it can't be clear, it's because there's confusion. And with confusion comes misalignment. And then all of a sudden, if you use, say, a tool like Balanced Scorecard, it won't work.
Absolutely.
Because the analytics and the dashboards can't work. If you think we're going for coffee and I think we're going for a beer, this is not always going to work out well. Although,
it's true.
Congrats, Starbucks, on working on a solution for that. Okay. That for me is step number one, is that recognition. So I was presenting to a group of CEOs the other day, and I described a situation. And one of the CEOs in the room who I met with yesterday followed up and said, "Oh my gracious, the second you said that, it was like, you get it. You understand my situation."
My world.
My world. The second part then is what organizations do. And I'm sure you've seen lots of culture surveys in the places you've worked and clients you've worked with, right?
Absolutely.
And according to a PhD researcher in Western Canada who published a peer-reviewed journal paper, there's 148 culture assessment tools that he could find.
Incredible.
Right? And a lot of them are associated with a consulting company.
Yeah, of course.
It's their proprietary product. Many of them are good. I've been involved in helping to administer a number of them. The one we're associated with, which is from Human Synergistics, is been around for more than 3 decades, has many tens of thousands of companies that have gone through it, and millions and millions and millions of data points to explain cultures, which they then follow the organizations to track their financial performance. And so they have a cause and effect. You have this culture, not good. You have that culture, it's good. Whatever the tool is, the big thing for me around this is discernment. And by discernment, what I mean is just because you see another tool that you could use doesn't mean you can't get more out of what you have.
Absolutely. So to clarify, you mean leveraging what you already have in front of you as opposed to trying to add on additional alternative information that could distract you.
Yeah, distract or bring into question, why are we doing this new one? Doesn't the last one matter? And then, if you've got a boss, then they're looking at you and saying, "Hey, Kirby, why are you doing this?" A case in point, a client that we've worked with came to me saying, "We have a culture problem." They'd gone through phase 1 and they had concluded that they had some kind of culture problem. We had a long conversation about the tool that we use, and I looked at their data. They were good enough. I signed my non-disclosure and I dove into the data. And to me, very quickly, it became clear. They don't need another culture assessment tool. What they need to do is to take the data set they have and look at it differently, because the way they were looking at it, they didn't see what was there to be found.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, one of the reasons why what we do with our clients is successful and sustainable is because we know that it's not always about introducing something new, trying something new. No. Sometimes it's just looking at what you have already in a different way.
And that's, I think, also what we're seeing as the world of big data has emerged. And, machine learning. What we're now realizing is there's so much data out there.
It's too much.
And that the struggle people have is by choosing a new tool, they think they can overcome the complexity of what they have.
Yeah.
And actually, some of the time, they're actually introducing a new layer of complexity.
100%.
And it's not helpful.
No.
Which is why I said to this client, hey, I played with your data set. I ran it through my statistical analysis software. And can I show you a picture? And as soon as we did that, plunk, something dropped out that was actionable.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is exciting.
Yes.
Because it takes away that feeling of intimidation of, is new better? Do I have to keep searching? Is something different needed to uncover what it is that we need to be looking at? And the answer a lot of the times is no.
No.
Like, you have what you need. And we see this in so many areas of our life, but what you need is right in front of you.
Well, and
right?
and I want to pick up on that because, as you were just speaking, it occurred to me, this is almost in the same vein as environmental sustainability.
Right.
Why spend more money, use more energy, consume more hours of people's lives when what we have, it will be adequate if we look how to reduce, reuse, recycle.
That's true.
Right?
But
It's
people
right there.
don't seem to understand that oftentimes simple is better. Like, we all think that we have, say, what appears to be a complex problem, like culture. How do you get 1,200 people on the same page? Well, first, what you can't. Like, you need reasonable expectation. You can get the majority of them, but you're not going to get all of them.
That's a whole other conversation about.
But simple is better. It doesn't mean you need to introduce 4 new LMSs and you need to have a new CRM and you have to make up 12 new positions and you have to add on all this extra. Like, sometimes simple is best.
Yes.
Straightforward is best, and you can use what you already have.
Yeah, and that's the last one I wanted to touch on is it's the understanding. So as I went through my black belt in Lean and Six Sigma and then moved on to the master black belt level, a lot of what you spend your time looking at are patterns of relationships between data sources that seem to have nothing to do with each other. The danger in this, and I wrote a letter to the editors of a journal on an article about this. There's a difference between causality and coincidence.
Absolutely.
And one of the dangers that I see and have read in peer-reviewed journals is that coincidence is good enough for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
And one of the article was actually about what the fire department of New York City was doing around their allocation of prevention budget. And what they were looking at was large data sets to understand patterns of where fires were coming up. What they didn't investigate at all, according to the article, was causality. So they allocated many, many millions of dollars of prevention effort, scarce dollars, based on coincidence, not causality.
How did that play out?
That's a great question because there's never been anything written about it since.
Interesting.
So I'm willing to bet maybe not as well as they'd hoped. Yet, when we come in and we ask for access to massive databases, drop them into our tool of choice, which is Minitab. If you don't use it, get it. You drop it into Minitab, and I have managed data sets with many millions of data points in thousands of columns. And with a powerful enough computer and that software, I will ask it to show me correlation. Now, correlation, causality, and coincidence need to be cleared up. Correlation just means coincidence could be there's no correlation, but they just happen to happen at the same time. Oh, look, it's meant to be. Maybe not. Okay. There's causality, which is a clear connection. And then there's correlation, which says there's something going on here. We don't know what. And this is where this study about eat more broccoli, no, don't eat broccoli. A lot of that stuff is all based in correlation because we don't know. When we come in and when we look at your culture, but your entire business, because we never just look at culture, we're looking at correlation beyond anything. So with this one client that we've worked with, access to their database, along with access on their culture survey they've been running for years, along with some other key information, and dropped it in, and what dropped out was the decline in their culture score
was due to
one manager. And that manager, something had happened. Over the course of this year to that year, the managers hadn't moved around. And all of a sudden there was scores that had plummeted.
Yeah. Now, before everyone starts to think, oh my God, the scores started to go down by 3%, clearly we need to fire that manager.
You don't want to do that. This person's amazing.
But you don't know that unless you actually look at the full picture. And
Right.
what I find frustrating is oftentimes everyone's just looking at the engagement score and they don't take it any further, for one. They start trying to touch and play with things that have nothing to do with it, too. But I want you to explain the outcome. After it was identified that this area, in this particular area of the business, this department, this leader, like to that point, this leader seems to be correlated somehow with the scores coming down.
Right.
What happened next?
And that gets to the third point I wanted to bring to you today, which is when you get really powerful insights, specific insights like that, all of a sudden your options and the conversations you can have are completely different than how scary it is to say, oh my gosh, our culture numbers are down X% year over year. We need to launch an engagement initiative, barbecues, parties. And no, but I mean, it's somebody, coming at a match with a bunch of fire trucks.
Well, and that's
it's
the
crazy.
thing. I mean, all you see is an outcome. It's just information.
Right.
You still haven't yet looked into what the potential solutions might be because you don't even know what the cause of that is. And yet people say engagement is down from 87 to 84. We need to start whipping up. And then you start off on this tangent that has nothing to do with it, which is why oftentimes you do year over year, all of these initiatives are put into place and nothing changes. However, I want you to explain what happened once they identified the leader.
I'll explain that one, then I want to come back to another example.
Sure.
So what happened with this leader was they engaged, like the president of the division engaged with this individual and they began a conversation. There had been massive life changes go on for this person. And they, along with maybe a little too much fervor and a little trying too hard, they all coalesced into the team that reported to this person, basically having a negative reaction to the way this person had shifted the way they managed them.
Okay.
Is there a problem with the person? No. Was there a problem with the business? No, they're fabulous. What there was something much more nuanced and complex. And what ended up happening was between some education and actually a team engagement effort to learn and grow as a team, they created an internal support network for each, and they became coaches to each other.
Beautiful.
And in doing so, this person found a safe place. And that safe place was a place to talk about all the life stuff that nobody at work knew. And once that got on the table, and once everybody started looking at them through different eyes, they counseled that person and helped that person basically rediscover their leadership style. And that person is now leading the group with the highest culture and engagement scores in the company.
I love that. I mean, it speaks to a number of different things. But for me, what's come out of the experience is that just being a human being, pausing and taking a breath to go, someone in our work family is struggling and it's showing up in the engagement and the way that they're managing, which is different from before. Something might be up. Now, are we suggesting that everyone needs to share personal information in order to get... No.
That's a very personal thing.
Absolutely. In this case, it made sense. It may not. However, there is something to be said for when you're able to sharing a bit of information, insight that lets other people in enough that they can help you succeed.
And there's cultural, as in home country cultural challenges with that of 99 flavors. Your point is excellent. And the thing to me that was really quite astounding to watch in that specific example, and I mean, I know the person, I've worked with the person, is there's absolutely no ill intent. And in the hands of a different leader, they could have been very quickly and easily labeled as a problem manager,
fired,
if not fired, then just tarred with a brush. And what their open-mindedness did was it allowed them to really have what I would describe as a GYST moment, which was other than, it's like, oh, we got to do something. Yeah. There's a deep breath, and they just sit back, relax, and listen, and get a handle on what's really going on. And as soon as they got it, they were wonderful about what to do. Other organizations, I think they struggle with finding that GYST moment where they can allow themselves to relax, to take the deep breath, and really, do something meaningful.
Yeah, and I also think too that oftentimes the thing that attracts clients to us is what can off-put others simply because of the misinterpretation of what a GYST moment is. Now, on the surface, get your shit together sounds, a bit hard. It's a little bit, like grab you by the shoulders and wake up.
No.
Some people do need that.
Sometimes it's just this.
Exactly.
Right?
Sometimes it's just being
human,
kind, human,
understanding,
empathetic. Yeah. Sometimes GYST moment, when you get your shit together, it means, okay,
stop jumping to delusions.
Yes, and maybe it's time that I let a few people in.
That too.
Asking and accepting help.
Absolutely.
That can be a GYST moment as well.
And I'll share one before we close out. I had taken a role where I was an executive and at the same time going through the black belt program, which had been deemed illegal in the company. No one was allowed to do that.
To do the black belt program?
And be an executive. Yeah, a Lean Sigma black belt.
Interesting.
And be an executive at the same time because it was too much.
Okay.
My
first thought was, how dare you improve yourself? But
no,
were they actually looking to protect you?
And the construct was you actually signed a contract and you quit your job, and you actually signed into the black belt program. It was all hands on deck. It was hardcore.
Okay.
They for a bunch of, I think, valid reasons, they said, no, Kirby, we think you can do both. And I'm standing in my kitchen as they took my corner office, big spacious corner office, and they stuck me underneath the air handling unit in Cube Farm, where I was supposed to talk with the presidents of other businesses about how they were going to re-engineer their companies and start to lay off people. And I can remember talking with my boss and saying to him, okay, look, Cam, if you're trying to find out how much stress I could take before I say bad words, you've gotten there. At which point I used a string of bad words, which I regret to this day, to let him know that I don't know who was thinking what, but if he thought that this was going to continue, then one or both of those roles was ending because that was it. He didn't know that. He thought I was fine. Right? It's like, okay, I could have expressed myself perhaps more diplomatically, but I also needed him to know.
But you make a good point. So for somebody like yourself that has spent a long time working on mindset, centering, being resilient and calm and drawing experience that we both share, for someone to reach that point where, here's the thing, that's the canary in the coal mine.
Right.
Oftentimes you'll see really good, hardworking people all of a sudden fly off the handle and everyone goes,
what the hell was that?
What's going on with them? That's a sign like you've reached your point and you haven't yet had the moment where you can say, okay, I need help. And sometimes people get pushed to
very
that
much,
point.
Very much.
It's the I don't care what I look like because I need help point.
And that actually circles back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is, if you find that you've got people doing exactly that, they're popping off, they're quitting with no notice, they just drop out of sight, the performance of them team goes through the floor.
Yeah.
There might actually be something going on other than them, right?
Yes.
Because,
God forbid everyone has a life outside of work.
Well, it's not only that, because to me, and this is, I'm going to tie a bow on this, it's the structure that determines behavior.
Absolutely.
The way you see in a river are because of the rocks below. That's one of the best analogies I've ever seen.
Good.
If you all of a sudden see all kinds of rapids where you never saw them before, it may not be the water.
Yeah.
It could be what's happened underneath.
Yeah.
And that's where we encourage you, as you're looking at this scary idea of approaching culture, to realize that there's good reasons to go after it, number one. Number two, there's lots of ways to assess it. There's lots of ways to make the most of what you have. And then lastly, that precision is possible. I'm doing it with multiple clients right now.
Yep.
And you don't have to take the fire hose, the culture fire hose to a place. You can go and very, very specifically work on a couple of things. And a lot of times, especially with a pretty good culture, you'll see dramatic improvements.
The results.
The results. You'll see the results on your culture survey, but more importantly, you'll see it in how happy your people are at work, your revenue, and just as importantly, your operating income.
Absolutely. I love that.
So, I'm Kirby James from the GYST Method.
I'm Nicole Gerard from the GYST Method.
Thank you very much, and feel free to weigh in